The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are now entering the Stone Zone. You know, NBC really is fake news. They have an extended story about friction between President Donald Trump and his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. I have spoken to people, shall we say, at the highest possible levels of the administration. And I can tell you that this story is bogus. There is no friction between the president and Tulsi Gabbard, the former four-term congresswoman from Hawaii, who is a decorated combat veteran in both Iraq and Kuwait, continues to be a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, veteran member of the House International Affairs Committee, and I think among President Trump's very best appointees. I believe that there are those with their own agenda within this administration seeking to undermine her. Her job is to just give President Trump the very best intelligence from 17 different intelligence agencies. There is no rift between them. And the president, and only the president, will make decisions regarding actions between the Israelis and Iran. In the meantime, we are learning more and more about the Biden Justice Department and the extraordinary corruption that existed there. Internal FBI emails have just been revealed that rogue agents and prosecutors in the Biden Department of Justice were looking for additional ways to pile on new criminal charges against Donald Trump over the protests of January 6, 2021. The 2023 emails, now obtained by Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, demonstrated the nitpicking malice of anti-Trump lawfare that tainted the special counsel Jack Smith's investigation during Joe Biden's presidency. Can we do some work to nail down Trump's role in this, writes prosecutor J.P. Cooney to the Department of Justice and his colleagues on March 8, 2023, in an email with the subject line, January 6 Prisoner Choir, DJT. And the email attached a Forbes.com article entitled, Trump Collaborates on Song with January 6 Defendants. Now, I'm very familiar with J.P. Cooney. He was the final federal prosecutor in my case. I also know from a previous Washington Post story that he wanted to subpoena my emails, my text messages, my phone calls after January 6th, even though I was not at the Capitol on January 6th. And any claim that I knew in advance about any illegal action on January 6th, any claim that I participated in, condoned, or knew in advance about such actions is categorically false. See, in this country, we have something called probable cause. They can investigate an individual for crime if they have some peripheral evidence that they were involved in a crime or have knowledge of a crime. But as early as April of 2020, Reuters correctly reported that there was no evidence whatsoever that I was aware of or involved in any way in any illegal activity at the Capitol. Also, J.P. Cooney still has prosecutorial misconduct claims pending against him from the Steve Bannon case filed by criminal defense lawyer David Schoen. So this is not surprising to me that they were still trying to connect Donald Trump where there is no connection. Cooney was a deputy special counsel who worked on the Mueller investigation, also worked on Jack Smith's Get Trump special counsel investigations, and Cooney's email targeted Trump over his involvement in this recording, which you may have heard, in which the president recites the Pledge of Allegiance with the January 6th Prisoner Choir providing a soundtrack. It is one of the most moving things you have ever heard. According to this article in Forbes, Trump recorded the Pledge of Allegiance at Mar-a-Lago, and Kash Patel, who now just happens to be the FBI director, and Ed Henry, formerly of Fox News, were also involved, Cooney wrote in his email chain. The profits are routed to an LLC run by Henry, and proceedings are intended for families of incarcerated January 6 defendants. But it is apparently a vetting process that excludes families of defendants who assaulted police officers. I asked Ahmed, evidently this is a reference to prosecutor Ahmed Bassett, who was fired earlier this month, to preserve these last night. Cooney also instructed colleagues to start looking at some of the process of Ed Henry's LLC, presumably a legal process in which such a subpoena, a search warrant, or other court-authorized actions to gather evidence. Folks, this is what we call a witch hunt. His email was forwarded to 8 agents and Department of Justice staffs, including notoriously anti-Trump FBI Special Agent Warren Giardina, who responded 2 years later to say that he was investigating the claims in the Forbes article after Trump and the January 6th choir. Esther and I are working on this today, said Agent Giardina. We're going to put something together. Our findings will be at 2 p.m. and we'll get something back to you. Now, this fellow Giardina was Agent Zero in a lot of the overzealous FBI actions involving President Trump and his allies, such as me. Those include the investigation of Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro on contempt of Congress charges for refusing to appear before the House committee investigating the January 6th riot. It was also Giardina's FBI team that arrested Navarro as he was about to board a plane at Reagan National Airport in 2022, putting him in leg irons and throwing him in jail instead of simply issuing a summons for him to come to court, as federal judges overseeing his case actually said while criticizing the heavy-handedness of the FBI. Very similar to my situation. I was charged with the first-time nonviolent crime of lying to Congress, even though no misstatement I made to Congress hid any underlying crime. No motive, no crime. We would only learn this, of course, after BuzzFeed sued the Department of Justice and forced them to release the entire unredacted copy of Robert Mueller's final report. In fact, my lawyers were in touch with Special Counsel Mueller's office the day before 29 FBI agents showed up at my house at 6 a.m. in the morning in full SWAT gear, wearing night goggles, and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, when all they really had to do was inform my criminal defense attorney that I was going to be charged, in which case I would have simply turned myself in. There is a silver lining. I raised almost $3 million in the 72 hours after CNN just happened to coincidentally be at my home when my wife and I were perp walked out into the street at 6 o'clock in the morning. Of course, I was arrested at 6:06 a.m. and then at 6:11 a.m., a producer from CNN contacted my lawyer by text and said, "Your client has been arrested." He didn't even know. And then he said, "Arrested for what?" She responded by sending him a copy in text of my sealed indictment. An indictment that included no timestamps, no court markings, clearly a document that was sealed until 10:30 that morning. So how could CNN have possibly gotten a copy of my sealed indictment? Well, that story is told by looking at the metadata tags in my criminal indictment and finding the initials of Andrew Weissman, perhaps the single most corrupt prosecutor in U.S. history, and obviously, therefore, the man who leaked the document to CNN, who later got an award for being there when I was arrested, claiming that their presence was based on a journalistic hunch. Well, I can't say it because it's a family program. This is an absurdity. So those who were deeply involved in Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the debunked Russian collusion investigation, those who were involved in the investigations of Trump allies like Dan Scavino and myself, as well as the Hillary Clinton's emails erased, these folks now come under the investigation of the Senate committee headed by Chuck Grassley. Whistleblowers have told Grassley that FBI agents like Giardina openly stated their desire to investigate Trump, even if it meant a false predication. Again, as I spoke earlier, you have to have a probable cause before you can open an investigation. Making a recording of citing the Pledge of Allegiance while January 6 prisoners record a soundtrack of the national anthem in the background is hardly the predicate one needs to open a criminal investigation. In the meantime, President Donald Trump has called for the appointment of a special counsel to look into the 2020 elections. I think this is one of the best ideas I've heard in some time. It will allow us, once and for all, to establish what actually happened in 2020. Without making any claims here, I do point out that only last week, FBI Director Kash Patel announced that he had turned over to the to the Senate Judiciary Committee records regarding 20,000 fake driver's licenses that came into Chicago from China just before the 2020 election. That would mean, of course, that Christopher Wray, the FBI director, lied under oath to Congress when he said that he was completely unaware of any plot by any foreign nation to interfere with the 2020 elections. So I think we need this special prosecutor. I would recommend either Eagle Ed Martin, or I think it is Phil Klein, who I think is the Attorney General of Kansas, I believe, both of whom have done extraordinary work to uncover whether we had an honest election in 2020 or not. It's clearly time for the American people to know the truth. Ultimately, of course, these efforts to set up Donald Trump regarding regarding January 6th failed because he comprehensively won the 2024 election. Smith was forced to drop the January 6th and the Mar-a-Lago cases against him, and Trump was subsequently fired both Smith and their law firms, and I think correctly pardoned every January 6th defendant. Donald Trump is a man who says what he means and means what he says. Meanwhile, I point out yet again that Tulsi Gabbard's comments before the Senate regarding Iran and their process of making the nuclear bomb have been taken out of context, so be on the lookout for fake news regarding Tulsi Gabbard. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Stone Zone. We'll be back with more hot political news, so whatever you do, please don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And you're back in the Stone Zone. This is the hottest political commentary show on AM radio today, and we're glad to have you in the zone. As I say, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is now fired back at CNN and others, saying she and President Trump are on the exact same page when it comes to the question of Iran's nuclear capabilities and their timeline. Gabbard called out the media for taking some of her comments out of context, leaving out her full testimony before Congress. CNN's Caitlin Collins asked Trump aboard Air Force One to respond to remarks made by Gabbard under oath before the House. When Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building nuclear weapons, Collins claims. In response, Gabbard fired back on Twitter saying she and the president were completely aligned in their assessment in March. If you go back and look, you will see that President Trump was saying the exact same thing that Gabbard said in her annual threat assessment back in March. Unfortunately, too many people in media don't care to read all of what I actually said. Gabbard's statement was certified by the Daily Caller, an independent news outlet that followed up with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. In her March testimony before Congress, Gabbard provided a detailed insight into the intelligence community's assessment of Iranian nuclear threat. In the last year, we've seen an erosion of the decades-long taboo in Iran of discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Here are the key words. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest level ever and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Gabbard also spoke from Capitol Hill on Tuesday, saying what President Trump is saying is the same thing I said in my annual threat assessment in March to Congress. Gabbard was in the Situation Room meeting with Trump to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Middle East this past Tuesday. With the Trump administration weighing its next move, Gabbard was in on every meeting at the White House to discuss Middle Eastern options. Media reports to the contrary are false. The first Israeli strikes came just hours after Iran announced plans to build and activate a third nuclear enrichment facility this past Thursday. So Iran's announcements heightened tensions with the United States nuclear watchdog, which earlier that day formally declared Iran in violation of its non-proliferation obligations aimed at preventing the development of nuclear weapons. Again, the stories in the fake news detailing a rift between President Donald Trump and his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, are completely false. Coming up next, investigative journalist Sam Antar, fraud investigator par excellence, has a shocking news story regarding Attorney General Letitia James. You don't want to miss this, folks, so please, whatever you do, stay in the zone, because we'll be right back with more shocking political news on the other side.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and we're back in the Stone Zone. Joining me now is Sam E. Antar. He's a former certified public accountant whose career trajectory took a remarkable turn from perpetrator to investigator of financial fraud. See, Sam was the former chief financial officer of Crazy Eddie. Remember them? A major consumer electronics chain in the northeastern United States during the 1980s. Sam was one of the key figures in one of the decade's largest security fraud schemes. But Sam Antar paid his debt to society, and following his criminal conviction, after paying the price, he redirected his expertise towards forensic accounting, leveraging his firsthand knowledge of financial fraud to help combat white-collar fraud. His unique perspective and technical expertise have made him an expert advisor to various clients, including law firms, government agencies, law enforcement departments, independent investment research firms, hedge funds, and others. His website, whitecollarfraud.com, is a must-see. Joining me now in the Stone Zone, none other than Sam Antar. Sam, welcome into the zone.
How are you, Roger? Thank you for having me on.
I'm delighted to have you because, well, you always break big news, and you have new big news. A story you have just broken on your website essentially outlines the fact that Governor Kathy Hochul's husband's law firm, Davis Polk, had a $325,000 dormant contract with the Attorney General's office. It had been dormant for 14 months, $0 paid, nothing moved. Then suddenly, in January, after Hochul's husband joined the firm. Even after the contract had expired, or should I say 401 days after it began and 37 days after it was expired, they suddenly got a $231,000 payment. Now, coincidentally, this appears to have happened contiguous with the Guardian reporting that a federal grand jury is now investigating Attorney General Letitia James for serial mortgage fraud. So the same day, the Hochul budget passed, including a $10 million taxpayer-funded legal shield for state officials under federal investigation. Like with all your reports, Sam, this isn't speculation. It's all documented right there at whitecollarfraud.com. So lay the story out for us, Sam.
Okay, first of all, it's really a story about a financial triangle between Hochul and her husband and Letitia James and the law firm. So let's start out from the very beginning. Let's go back to February 1st, 2023. Davis Polk signs a contract for $325,000 with the New York Attorney General's office. Now, they've been doing business with other agencies, and in fact, from 2001 to 2024, they received $7 million from other New York City government agencies. But what makes this interesting is that this contract that they signed just lay dormant. And not only that, it was filed and approved over 400 days after the contract began. So it didn't exist on paper, at least on our paper. In other words, it wasn't visible. So February 1st, the contract begins. There are no payments for 14 months. Okay? Exactly 11 months later, William Hochul, Kathy Hochul's husband, joins Davis Polk. He gets $950,000 in 2024, and his employment starts on January 2nd, 2024. Okay? On January 31st, 2024, the contract with Davis Polk expired. No money, no visible authority for continued payments. It just goes off the radar. Then on March 8th, the expired contract is filed and approved 37 days after it expired, which is about 400 days after the contract was initiated. What the hell is going on there? Then on April 30th, 2024, the contract between March and April 2024, the contract is extended because William Hochul is now part of the firm. And on April 30th, 2004, the William Hochul's firm gets their first payment, $231,644 payable to Davis Polk, his law firm. Okay? Then, let's fast forward, okay? Now they're starting to get payments as soon as William Hochul joins. Now let's fast forward it. March 8th, 2025, the Guardian reports as a grand jury impaneled in Virginia. Other outlets report that there's an FBI investigation out of New York. And on that same day, Hochul goes and provides her with a $10 million defense fund. Now, $483,000 was paid to Hochul's law firm from the New York Attorney General's office, Tish James' office. Before that happened, okay? And it only happened after Hochul's husband joined the firm. So what you have here is a financial quid pro quo, a protection network, a triangle protection network between Hochul, Tish James, and her husband's law firm.
So, Sam, let me ask what I guess should be an obvious question. The allegations against Attorney General Letitia James, which today are just that, allegations, serious allegations, documented allegations, but the allegations all involve her private conduct as a citizen. They involve her personal mortgages and what appears to me to be a 22-year record of serial mortgage fraud. Why should the New York taxpayers pick up the tab for her legal defense? These are not investigations into her official actions as Attorney General, but investigations into her personal conduct. Why should taxpayers be picking up the tab?
I agree with you. That's exactly right. I could understand if she's sued as part of her job, as part of her duties as the Attorney General. But this mortgage fraud predates her duties as an Attorney General and still has nothing to do with it as it occurred when she was Attorney General. Not only that, but this mortgage fraud predates when Trump became a Republican. He was a Democrat at the time. So you can't argue that. Trump didn't put pencil to paper. MAGA didn't put pencil to paper. You didn't put pencil to paper. And me, a Democrat, I didn't put pencil to paper. All we did was look at her documents, and it reveals a fraud. And on top of that, you got New York State taxpayers footing the bill for something that doesn't have to do with her job. And the coincidence is that $10 million comes after Hochul's husband's law firm receives $483,000. Listen,
Sam,
I wasn't born yesterday. It smells. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sam, the thing that's interesting here, of course, is that Letitia James's defense on all these matters is that this is retribution or revenge by Donald Trump. As I recall, you are not only not a Republican, you're not a Trump supporter. You're
no, I don't even like him.
There you go. So this idea that you are somehow an agent for the revenge of Donald Trump is pretty laughable. Interestingly enough, the Federal Housing Finance Administration, which has specific authority to regulate mortgages and to search for mortgage fraud, reviewed all of the allegations that you first raised publicly, and after their lawyers reviewed them, sent a formal letter over to the Department of Justice, which is essentially a referral for criminal action. Now, some have argued that although it is undisputed that the Attorney General, Letitia James, lied on these sworn forms, signing 12 different places, by the way, so saying it was a typo is not going to fly, saying when she applied for a mortgage in Brooklyn, in Virginia, that she and her daughter would inhabit the home in which they were borrowing to get a mortgage, when obviously she cannot be a resident of Virginia and still legally serve as the Attorney General of the state of New York. But some people have said, well, she may have lied, but since there was no advantage to her, there is no crime. How would you address that? U.S. code, I think it's 1014. I might have gotten the last two numbers wrong. But under the U.S. code and also under Supreme Court cases, you don't even have to prove that the lender relied upon it or used it. All you have to show that there was an intent to influence the lender, which is squarely there. Okay? Another thing is, if the lender does not even use the information or rely on it, a federal crime was committed when she signed that document and turned it over to the mortgage company. And that document, which I don't think she counted on being recorded, was recorded with the mortgage. It's a public record. So I don't buy that standard, well, no harm, no foul, that BS. First of all, we don't know if there was any harm or foul. Second of all, even if there was no harm or foul,
she committed a federal crime by lying on that document. Now, it's not just that one-off thing, okay? You're talking about a history of false financial disclosures. It's not like, oh, I made one mistake. Okay, I get it. Sometimes people make mistakes, okay? But this is not a mistake, okay? This was witnessed by two people in her office. This is the Attorney General of the state of New York signing a sworn document. And it says in caps that she intended to make it her primary residence. And this was done about 30 or 40 days before the Trump trial. The ultimate hypocrisy.
Well, plus, in many cases, she borrowed substantially more in mortgages than the value of the property. So is she not inflating the value of her assets? Exactly what, ironically, she accused Donald Trump of doing in a bogus case in New York under a law in which no one has ever been prosecuted?
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's entirely possible. Let me explain. She has another property in Virginia on Peroni Avenue, okay? She states that the value is between $100,000 to $150,000. That's her, not me, not you, not anybody else, her. Now, she has a $108,000 mortgage that wasn't disclosed in her financial disclosures, so now we have $108,000. Let's leave out the question of why she omitted it from her financial disclosures. Then there are two other mortgages that are in her financial disclosures, but are not in the property record. You want to call them phantom mortgages, unrecorded mortgages, etc. When you add up the two phantom mortgages and the mortgage that she didn't show in the financial disclosures, it comes out to roughly $500,000 on the property that she claims was worth between $100,000 to $150,000. That in of itself is a lie, mail fraud with the New York, with her filings with New York State. Secondary, did she file, when she applied for the mortgage, did she have an appraisal that differed from the amount that she told New York State? Then you got another possible crime being committed. So what's going on is that the feds have to gather all of this evidence, piece it together, and present a case. Now, I believe they have a case already. I believe that they should have indicted already, but I understand that white-collar cases take time. But I'm telling you now, and I'm telling the feds if they're listening, I'm watching, and if you F up this case, you're going to be held accountable.
Well, there is no question that other people have been prosecuted for the exact same thing, and I think it was Letitia James who said, no one is above the law. Another story broke 2 days ago at Art Voice, an upstate newspaper, that claims that a woman named Angel Du Bois claims that Letitia James covered up a sexual harassment and in fact a sexual assault against her by James' chief of that staff, Ibrahim Khan. There's already another lawsuit by another woman who worked in that office claiming the same thing. So I think you're going to hear a lot more about both of those stories. If you're just tuning in, this is the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. We're talking to Sam Antar, and we're breaking news right here in the zone. So whatever you do, please don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with one of the most interesting guests I've ever had. Sam Antar was a certified public accountant who was later convicted in one of the largest security fraud schemes in American history, the Crazy Eddie scandal. Remember them? They were a major consumer electronics chain in the northeastern United States. They were very hot in the 1980s until they crashed. But Sam Antar was convicted but paid his debt to society. And upon finishing his sentence, redirected his expertise towards forensic accounting, leveraging his firsthand knowledge of criminal fraud to help combat white-collar fraud. He's kind of made a specialty at looking at our political leaders, and there's plenty of fraud to find. He broke an amazing story, as we just outlined, in which the law firm that Governor Hochul's husband belongs to suddenly got huge payments concurrent with a federal investigation announced into Attorney General Letitia James and a $10 million taxpayer-funded bailout, I should say, to pay for Letitia James' legal defense, even though the investigation is not into James' official duties or any act she took as Attorney General, but her personal conduct. Sam, here's my question. New York State law is pretty tight when it comes to disclosure. We got about 2.5 minutes left here, a little less. Isn't Letitia James required to disclose all of these things to the state of New York, and how is she done on that score?
Well, on her property, she's made numerous significant omissions. For example, on her Brooklyn property, there is a mortgage that she lists on her on the financial statement. It cannot be found in the property records. There are mortgages that are in the property records but cannot be found in her disclosures. And this goes on and on and on with the other properties that she's listed. The Peroni Avenue thing that we just spoke about, $500,000 in loans, $100,000 to $150,000 stated value. One mortgage there is not listed that she had on the property, and 2 other mortgages can't be found in the property disclosures, those phantom mortgages. On the other property, the Sterling Street property, is completely absent from our financial disclosures to New York State. So what you have here is not just mortgage fraud. You have here is a lady that's just a serial liar. Whenever she puts pen to paper, none of the information can be trusted because significant omissions, significant gaps that needs to be, looked at with somebody with subpoena power that I don't have.
All right, we have to leave it there. I want to reiterate our invitation to Attorney General Letitia James. You're welcome to come into the Stone Zone at any time to make your case and defend yourself against any of these newsworthy allegations. Let me thank my guest, Sam Antar, for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Again, you can check out the documentation of everything he's reported by going to whitecollarfraud.com. That's whitecollarfraud.com. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed. We'll see you back in the Stone Zone then.
Thanks for listening to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear the Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?